I'm stuck at haunted airport forever. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. The email came through an hour before I even left for the airport. Flight delayed. Further updates to follow. Annoying, but not unusual. I'd been on enough business trips to know delays were part of the package. What I didn't expect was to get stranded overnight in a near-empty airport in the middle of nowhere. It was late November, and I was flying out of a regional airport so small it didn't even have a name, just the code JXH. My layover was supposed to be 2 hours. Now it was going on 8. The flight attendants had disappeared hours ago, and the handful of passengers I'd seen earlier were long gone. The airport was practically deserted. The intercom crackled to life for the 5th time that night. Attention, Flight 247 to Denver is currently delayed. We apologize for the inconvenience. I rubbed my temples, staring at the flickering monitor above Gate 6. The word delayed glowed in angry red letters, mocking me. The last time I'd seen another person was 2 hours ago, a security guard pacing the concourse, his footsteps echoing in the emptiness. Now, even he was gone. The silence was oppressive. No chatter, no crying babies, not even the hum of conversation, just the faint buzz of fluorescent lights and the occasional groan of the wind outside. It was unnerving, but I told myself it was just my imagination. Airports feel different at night, I reasoned. But this felt wrong. The first strange thing happened around midnight. I was sitting by the gate, scrolling mindlessly through my phone when I heard footsteps. They were faint at first, echoing from somewhere behind me. I turned, expecting to see someone, a passenger, an employee, but the concourse was empty. "Hello?" I called out, my voice cracking in the silence. The footsteps stopped. I waited, my heart thudding in my chest, but there was no response, just the steady buzz of the overhead lights and the faint hum of the air conditioning. I stood, peering down the corridor. The shops were all dark, their metal shutters pulled down. The vending machines cast eerie, flickering reflections on the tile floor. No one was there. Shaking my head, I sat back down. It was late, I told myself. I was tired. My mind was playing tricks on me, but then the intercom crackled again. "Passenger James Hanley, please report to Gate 13 immediately. Passenger James Hanley to Gate 13. I froze. James Hanley? My name. The voice was wrong. It wasn't the robotic tone of the usual announcements. It was slower, softer, almost whispering. There was no Gate 13. I stayed seated, my legs refusing to move. The announcement repeated once, twice, then cut off mid-sentence, leaving only static. I looked around, hoping to see someone else, anyone else, but I was still alone. The flickering lights above seemed dimmer now, casting long, stretching shadows across the floor. I thought I saw movement out of the corner of my eye, a figure darting past the windows. But when I turned, there was nothing there. I tried to focus on my phone, but the signal was gone. No Wi-Fi, no bars. Just a black screen mocking me with its silence. Then the footsteps started again. This time, they were louder, closer. I stood, gripping the handle of my carry-on bag like it was a weapon, and slowly backed toward the window. The footsteps echoed through the concourse, uneven and shuffling, as if whoever, or whatever, was walking was dragging something behind them. "Who's there?" I called, my voice trembling. No answer, but I could feel it now. Something watching me. I couldn't see it, but I knew it was there, just beyond the edge of the light. The shadows seemed to pulse, growing darker and thicker, and for a moment, I thought I saw a hand, thin, pale, and impossibly long, reaching out from the corner of the hallway. I ran. I don't know how long I ran. The airport seemed to stretch on forever, its endless corridors twisting and turning in ways that didn't make sense. Shops and gates blurred past me, their signs flickering as if they were alive. The layout was wrong. Gates I'd passed earlier were now in different places, and no matter how far I went, I couldn't find the exit. The whispers started soon after. At first, I thought it was the intercom again, faint, distorted voices echoing through the speakers. But as I moved, I realized they were coming from the shadows, from the books in the shuttered stores, from the walls themselves. They weren't speaking English. They weren't speaking any language I'd ever heard. Finally, I saw it, a glowing sign above a gate I hadn't seen before. Gate 13. The intercom crackled again, that same whispering voice cutting through the static. "Passenger James Hanley, please board at Gate 13. Your flight is ready to depart." The gate was open, its jet bridge stretching into darkness. I should have turned back. I should have run, but something pulled me forward. Something cold and heavy, wrapping around my chest like a chain. The air grew colder as I approached, my breath fogging in front of me. The shadows seemed to shift, coalescing into shapes, figures with empty eyes and gaping mouths, their bodies bent and broken. "Leave," one of them whispered, its voice rasping like dry leaves. "You don't belong here." I stepped onto the jet bridge, my legs moving on their own. The jet bridge vanished behind me the moment I stepped into the plane. I spun around, but the door was gone. Just smooth, seamless walls that pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. The whispers I'd been hearing outside were louder now, echoing in my skull like they were coming from inside my own head. "Welcome," the flight attendant said again, her blank face twisting into something that resembled a smile, but wasn't. Her voice was too soft, too sweet, like a lullaby hiding a scream. "We've been waiting for you." The passengers didn't move, their heads still tilted toward me. I wanted to speak, to ask where I was, what this place was, but my throat had closed up. My feet refused to move. Then I saw the list. It was scrawled across the bulkhead at the front of the cabin, long and crooked as though it had been scratched into the metal by claws. My name was at the top, written in black ink that shimmered like oil. Below it were hundreds of other names, some crossed out, others underlined. But the names weren't just written, they were whispering. I could hear them, voices murmuring my name, calling to me, pulling me forward. The flight attendant stepped closer, her body moving with a jerky, unnatural rhythm, as though she hadn't walked in a long time. She gestured toward one of the seats, her smile widening. "Please, take your seat. We're about to depart." I shook my head, backing away. "No, I'm not staying here. I didn't sign up for this." The flight attendant didn't answer. She just tilted her head, her eyes, or where her eyes should have been, locking onto mine. Then the passengers began to move. It wasn't a sudden motion. It was slow, deliberate, each figure turning their head toward me, their featureless faces somehow filled with malice. One by one, they unbuckled themselves from their seats, their movements stiff and puppet-like. They stood, swaying slightly, and began to shuffle toward me. "Please take your seat," the flight attendant repeated, her voice now distorted, layered with static. "This is where you belong." I ran. The plane stretched on forever, row after row of seats that blurred together in the dim, flickering light. No matter how far I ran, I couldn't reach the back of the plane. The aisle twisted and turned, looping back on itself, the walls narrowing until they felt like they were pressing against me. The passengers followed, their whispers growing louder, more insistent. At some point, I stopped running. My legs gave out, and I collapsed into an empty seat, gasping for breath. The moment I sat down, the plane shuddered violently, throwing me against the window. Outside, there was nothing but darkness, a void that pulsed with flashes of red, like veins of fire running through an endless black sky. The intercom crackled to life. "Attention, passengers! We are now preparing for final descent. Please fasten your seatbelts." I tried to get up, but the seatbelt wrapped itself around me, tightening on its own. The plane began to shake, the lights flickering wildly as the whispers reached a deafening roar. The passengers were all seated again, staring straight ahead, their faces blank and unmoving. The flight attendant stood at the front of the cabin, her smile now stretching unnaturally wide, splitting her face almost in two. The plane tilted sharply, and I realized we were falling. "Help!" I screamed, struggling against the seatbelt. "Someone help me!" No one moved. The last thing I saw before everything went dark was the flight attendant leaning toward me, her voice a whisper in my ear. "Welcome home." I woke up in the airport. At first I thought it was all a nightmare. I was back in the concourse, sitting in one of the hard plastic chairs by gate 6. The lights were dim and the intercom buzzed faintly overhead. But something was different. The terminal was wrong. The layout was off, the walls angled in ways that didn't make sense. The shops were boarded up, their shutters covered in strange, unreadable symbols. The air smelled of burning metal and something sweet, like rotting fruit, and the passengers were back. They sat scattered throughout the terminal, their faces hidden in shadow. None of them moved, none of them spoke, but I could feel their eyes on me. I tried to leave, but the exit signs were gone. Every hallway I walked down led me back to the same place, gate 13. The monitor above the gate flickered, its screen flashing the same message over and over. "Flight 247 boarding now." The intercom crackled to life again, the voice soft and sinister. "Passenger James Hanley, please proceed to gate 13. This is your final call. I'm still here. I don't know how long it's been. Days? Weeks? Time doesn't work the same way here. The terminal is endless, its halls twisting and looping back on themselves. I've stopped trying to escape. There's nowhere to go. The passengers are always watching. Sometimes I think I hear them whispering my name, their voices blending with the static on the intercom. But the worst part is the plane. It's still at gate 13, waiting for me. I can see it through the window, its shadowy form shimmering in the flickering light, the jet bridge stretching out like a beckoning hand. I know I'll have to board it eventually, The whispers won't stop until I do. And when I do, I know I'll never come back. Because this isn't an airport. It's a trap. A place between worlds, feeding on lost souls like mine. And once you enter, you're part of it forever. That's what I thought, until tonight. Something changed. The intercom crackled, but this time it didn't call for another passenger. This time the voice said something else. Something that made my blood run cold. Attention, passenger James Hanley, please proceed to gate 13. You are delaying the others. The others? The intercom crackled again, louder now, its tone harsher, more impatient. Passenger James Hanley, board the plane immediately. This is your final warning. The terminal grew darker, the shadows stretching across the floor like ink spreading through water. The passengers began to move, their heads turning toward me in unison. They stood slowly, their bodies stiff and unnatural, and began to shuffle toward me. Their faces, empty, featureless, tilted upward as if they could see straight through me. I backed away, my heart pounding. "What do you want from me?" I shouted. The intercom buzzed, and the voice spoke again, clear and cold. "You're not a passenger, James." The lights flickered, and suddenly I was back on the plane. The seats stretched endlessly before me, each one filled with a shadowy figure. The whispers were deafening now, a chorus of voices that seemed to come from the walls themselves. At the front of the cabin stood the flight attendant, her face still blank, her smile still impossibly wide. She held out a hand, gesturing toward the cockpit. "Take your seat, James," she said. "It's time for your first flight." The passengers turned, their empty eyes locking onto me. They weren't watching me out of malice. They were waiting. That's when I saw it. At the very back of the plane, past the rows of seats and shadowed figures, was a mirror. And in the reflection, I saw myself, not as I was, but as I had become. I wasn't human anymore. My face was pale and featureless, my body thin and warped, my hands stained with black ink. I was one of them. The intercom buzzed one final time, and the voice said, "Congratulations, Captain Hanley. Your crew is ready. Finally, now we can proceed to the next step." Well, that was pretty much it. I hope you liked the story till then. Bye-bye.